We've got our final speaker coming up today, Gregory Poilasne, the CEO of Nuvi. Gregory, come on up. Let's give it up for Gregory, guys. Our final speaker of the day.
Thank you. Hello.
You got that, and your clicker, and good to go.
Good. Thank you for staying. I know I'm the last hurdle between you and some drinks probably on a Saturday night. So, thank you for staying. Let me go to the next page. Yeah, I'm Gregory, I'm the chairman and CEO and co-founder of Nuvi. Today, I decided that I would share with you, EV's threat or solution to the climate change. Obviously, we just had a lot of discussion around this, so I'm going to take it maybe from another angle, and I thought that would be an interesting title for the end of the day. I'll say a few words about Nuvi towards the end of the presentation, but we've seen all of this. The previous slide was, the previous presenter was talking quite a bit about it. Not only we've seen those pictures, but I think we are all impacted by it at this point, right? This summer, June and July were the hottest a month ever recorded on Earth. And what's more unfortunate is that actually we passed the 1.5 degree threshold that was the target. And this is impacting, initially was more, maybe underdeveloped countries, and us as developed countries were less impacted, but now it's clear that everybody is very much impacted. And the good news is the awareness is building, and I think that's what is very, very important. And the drivers, right, are obviously transportation and energy are the two key factors. About 2/3 of CO2 emission are driven by transportation and energy. And on the transportation side, 40% is due to consumer vehicles. So we all have a very important impact on this. Somebody said earlier, when you're in line at McDonald's or In-N-Out, maybe you can switch off your car for a little bit at least. But those are important numbers that we need to keep in mind. And sorry, it's jumping everywhere here. I'm going backward. No, sorry. We're gonna get there. And so what that means is the status quo is not an option, right? Things have to change. Now, very often people are criticizing electric vehicles, but the reason why we are looking at electric vehicles is because from an efficiency perspective, those are the best option that we have today, right? This is the total CO2 generation associated with building the vehicle as well as using the vehicle for the life of it. And you see some, very strong improvement with electric vehicle. Now, this is a base case, right? The best case. What does that mean when you have the best case? And there's a lot of discussion, but one thing is sure, first of all, right, for those of you that have an electric car, they are fun to drive. They accelerate pretty fast, so that's a very attractive feature of those vehicles. But they are very, very efficient, right? I mean, the internal combustion engine is an explosion engine, right? That means you have explosion happening inside your engine. And when you put your hand on it, it gets super hot. That means it's super inefficient, right? Electric vehicles, very few moving parts. They are very, very efficient. The batteries, obviously can warm up sometimes a little bit. That's a very important piece that becomes the key piece of the vehicle. But they remain so much more efficient when you are driving those electric vehicles. But there is a lot of question. We are still very early on in building those electric vehicles, and so you can very often see those titles, right? They are harmful to the environment. They are actually generating more CO2 than traditional vehicles. All those things have one thing in common, is they have nothing in common, right? Those critics are all diverging from each other. And usually when the critics are diverging from each other, that means some people, probably traditional industries that might be impacting by those changes, are really trying to push and create some brainwashing about people, to people saying, hey, those vehicles are actually not that efficient, you should really go back and stay. And they are pushing for the status quo very often, right? Some slightly improvement, but the status quo. In reality, right, it's very proven that electric vehicles are a lot more efficient, and they are generating less CO2 in the right condition. Now, there is a much more important piece that electric vehicles are going to have a very big impact on our society, and this is never discussed because we spend our time talking about the wrong thing. The issue, if you look at California right now, we have 1.5 million EVs on the road. By 2030, we'll have 8 million EVs on the road. If we look at the electric system in California, last summer, this summer has been pretty smooth and not too much heat, so we don't hear too much about those issues. But last summer, we had, at the end of August to the beginning of September, we had very, very hot days, and we reached the maximum ever reached peak consumption of energy in California, which was 52 gigawatt. That was the maximum peak we've ever had. And by the way, if some people had not shut down some of the loads, we would have been maybe going to 54 or 56 gigawatt. The 1.5 million EVs that we are on the road, if you think on average that they are connected to a 10 kilowatt charging station, which is most likely what you have, it's about 15 gigawatt. So it remains a fairly small load, and especially, you can think not all those vehicles are connected at the same time. So let's take 25% of those maybe connect at the same time. That means, a quarter of 15 is 3.75 gigawatt, which is very small compared to the 52 gigawatt that we reached last year. Now, in 7 years from now, we're going to have 8 million EVs on the road. 8 million EVs on the road, that means 80 gigawatt. That's drafting now the maximum peak that we have last year, just with EVs. And if I think that only a quarter of them are going to be connected, that's still 20 gigawatt, which is nearly half of the maximum peak we've ever had. And that's really the biggest issue, and this is where we should be putting all our attention, because there are drastic problems associated with it, right? One of them is that the distribution system is not sized for it today, right? It's not sized for those peaks. This is creating peaks that are very high, but very narrow in time. And therefore, you need to design a system that would be very expensive and very used for a very short period of time. The issue with that is the cost of energy would go higher for everybody. And if you start looking at your electric bill, you can actually start seeing the cost of energy going up. And some of it is because we are starting to integrate electric vehicle into a system, and that is pushed onto ratepayers. And so the cost of energy, even people that cannot afford electric vehicle would have to pay a higher cost for the electric energy, and that's not fair, that's not equitable. And that's definitely an area that we need to spend more time. Now, coming back to the previous issue of, hey, EVs are not efficient, let me give you a few points that if somebody brings that to you, you can tell them why EVs are better for the environment, better for our health. Number one, electric generation, traditional generation tends to be outside of cities, but we are driving vehicles inside the city. When we drive a vehicle inside the city, gasoline vehicles, we are creating CO2 generation inside the city. And in large cities, people are sometimes, especially, for example, in Southeast Asia, people are afraid to walk 500 meters because they know it's going to harm their lungs. And so they drive 500 meters and they're making the issue even larger. And so the ability of switching transportation from internal combustion engine to electric inside the cities actually allows to, as a first step, to push CO2 generation away from the center of the cities and provide a better health for everybody. Number two, electric vehicles can be charged at different times. You have different cycles of how those vehicles are used. And therefore, if you bring more renewable generation, those electric vehicles are actually greener, right? And the more renewable generation you're going to bring into a system, the greener, the better for the environment those vehicles are going to be. The third point, which is what Nuvi's business is about, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, but vehicle to grid is an essential aspect of electric vehicle deployment, especially because when you buy your car, the first thing is, we buy those cars we put a lot of money into them, but they are parked 95% of the time, right? So great investment. But if you have an electric car, you have a battery inside that vehicle, a fairly big battery. And as you know, renewable generation is very alternative, and therefore the ability of storing the energy inside batteries is very, very important. So the ability of storing the energy inside the battery and then providing grid services with that energy saved into the battery. Grid services that are enabling more renewable and to store that energy when we have to, provide actually very important services to the electric system, allows to not having to scale the electric system in the same way we do if you're just dealing with dumb charging. And it's actually allowing you to generate some revenue with your vehicle while your vehicle is parked. To give you an idea, in Denmark, we have been working with fleet vehicles since 2016. It's more than 7 years now. Those are ENV200, Nissan Leaf. They are connected on a 10 kilowatt charging station, and they've been generating about $3,000 per vehicle per year. Over the life of the vehicle, it's about 40% total cost of ownership reduction. It makes electric vehicle more accessible to everybody. And I would say the lower the cost of the electric vehicle, the more accessible that vehicle becomes. And therefore, the more fair this is in terms of distribution of how we are dealing with electrification of transportation. So when you have vehicle to grid with electric vehicles, this provides actually the ability to both reduce the CO2 generation on the energy generation side, because you can put more renewable, as well as promoting electric vehicles and therefore accelerating the electric vehicle penetration at the same time. It reduces the total cost of ownership of electric vehicles, and it keeps the cost of energy equitable. So at Nuvi, we are focused on deploying not just infrastructure for electric vehicles, but vehicle-to-grid infrastructure. Obviously, when you think about, hey, you're going to be discharging my car, I'm going to have to use it at some point. So obviously, the number one priority is to make sure that the vehicle is ready when you need it. And for that, as humans, we're actually very, very predictable. And so we have an AI platform that allows us to look at all the data and predict the next usage of the vehicle, predicts the level of energy that you're going to be requiring in your vehicle in order to go and do what you have to do. The second thing, it's providing cost saving and revenue generation, because when your vehicle is parked, we can use it to store energy and help the grid. The third thing is obviously not people like, but then energy going in and out of my battery that might impact it. At the heart of what we are doing is also to protect the battery that's inside your vehicle. Batteries are extremely resilient in some areas and weak in some others, and so we use the battery in the area they are the most resilient. And actually, with some of our partners, we are working on potentially extending the battery warranty by being able to really optimize the use of that battery. So just to close on this talk today, I think one of the things that we are the most proud at Nuvi, and some of the team members that are over there, is the deployment with school buses. Here we are working with Cajon Valley, Ramona, and San Diego Unified School Districts that are working on electrification of transportation. Two benefits, right? Number one is clean transportation for the kids, which is obviously very important. With traditional buses, actually a lot of the gas go inside of the bus, and that's not good for the health of the kids. So clean transportation for the kids. But also, when those buses are parked, they're able to provide those grid services that are helping to keep the lights on. Last year, during those peak heats, we had buses in Cajon Valley that were pushing energy back to the grid during those peaks. And we were a very strong contributor in keeping the lights on. And this year, with those 3 school districts in San Diego, we've had even more impact to it. So we're very excited about vehicle to grid, and we think this is the only way we will be able to achieve electric vehicle deployment. Thank you very much.